All right, let's get started. Hey folks, welcome back. Day 3 of CALIcon2020. Thanks for coming back, much appreciated. Just got some super quick housekeeping to handle. Our vendor sponsor sessions are going to include 3 folks to speak, PLI, Practicing Law Institute, the folks from Power Notes, and the folks from ExamSoft. Thank you for your support, guys and ladies, for supporting the conference and helping us out there. As I've reminded everybody, we're using the Q&A for questions. So if you got questions, put them in there. And if you want to chat, that's fine too. But if they're not in the questions, then I can't see them as fast because the chat kind of fills up really fast. And the chat is not private, just to warn you about that. We do have a website at community.cali.org where the conversation can continue. There are topics for every single session in this. Feel free to use that or to arrange with other people you meet there to set up your own Zoom meetings if you want. That's not using our Zoom, that's using your Zoom. You too have Zoom, obviously, if you're connecting to this. The Twitter hashtag is CALIcon. I didn't fix this. It's CALIcon2020. The great and powerful John was wrong yesterday. So ignore that, but nonetheless, follow Cali.org and follow me too. If you want to submit your own videos after this conference is over about your experiences with pandemics, legal education, and technology, we're going to keep the website at CALIcon.org, 2020.calicon.org open for that. It's an opportunity, for the folks who we had a fairly narrow schedule, right? We had. It hardly feels like it. It feels like it's been a very dense conference. I'm learning so much. But we know that we couldn't provide an opportunity for everybody to present, but we can because we have infinite disk space on YouTube. So if you want to submit a 5, 10, or 15-minute video, or if you want to have a conversation with a couple of people talking about a topic, happy to have you do that. All right, now I can stop sharing and introduce our folks. So the cluster we've got today, actually for the whole day is actually, every day's been awesome in my opinion, but today is also particularly awesome. The cluster we're talking here now is called Clinics and Engagement. And what we'd hoped to find there is people that during the emergency remote teaching probably had the hardest job of all. You can't just teach a clinic. You can't engage with your students merely through talking at a screen like this. And so we've got first up Melissa Kidder and Amanda Olson from Ohio Northern University, followed by Dionne, Gonder-Stanley, Dorothy Hairston Mitchell, speaking from North Carolina Central, and ending up is Angela Downs with the able help of Jenny Wondracek from UNT Dallas College of Law. So with that, let's have our first speakers up.
Well, hello everyone. Thank you for letting us participate. My name is Melissa Kidder, and with me I have Amanda Olson. She's a graduating 3L student from Ohio Northern University. She helped me put together the presentation and recording that you will see in a couple of minutes. And we hope that you enjoy the presentation that we put together, and we look forward to answering any questions that you have about our topics and the 5 ways that students stayed engaged at the end of the Q&A session. So thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for listening to our audio and video presentation. My name is Melissa Kidder. I'm a professor at Ohio Northern University, and I'm in charge of the Clinic and Externship Program at our law school. And with me, given the topic of our conversation, I thought it was important that we had a student's perspective on some of these topics. So Amanda, you want to introduce yourself to everyone?
Yes, my name is Amanda Olson, and I am a graduating 3L from Ohio Northern University.
When I saw the topic, I was talking to Amanda about, some ways that she thought students had been engaged or thought worked in the transition with this coronavirus to the online platform that we all had to do like so immediate. I thought it'd be great to get her involved with this presentation as well. And so we put together this, kind of 5 small ways that students thought worked in terms of helping them stay engaged when we made the switch to online learning, so that other professors, if they were looking at ways to try to integrate engaging methods, could, have rest at ease that it's not very complicated. And there's just some small things that they can do to try to, keep students engaged if we have to continue to do this. So the 5 things that we kind of came up with are humor and entertainment, engagement during in-class discussions, check-ins that professors did, some student recordings, and some in-class visuals that happened during the course of the lecture. So I'll let Amanda take over for the humor and entertainment section.
So I found that my class in general had used humor a lot to cope during this unprecedented time. And for example, as you can see here, my wills professor actually sent us a rules against perpetuities to be able to wash your hands to for 20 seconds. And so we found that humor from our professors was actually really helpful to try to make things a little bit more lighthearted. So whether that was emails, online discussion boards, professors would try to use memes, GIFs, or mention YouTube videos about songs for switching to remote learning and showing pictures like the one above. So I found that humor and entertainment was a very big and positive way that my class in general found to be engaging. And so what did you use humor to engage with your students, Professor Kidder?
I did try to do it in small ways. I didn't try to do a mass amounts of things, but I tried to do some small things. Like I have a pretrial litigation class that I teach, and so I try to find an entertaining deposition that we could watch during the class and, have a way to laugh about it, and then also talk about some important things like professional skills when you're doing and conducting a deposition. The students, and I'm sure Amanda can attest, were all into this Tiger King, and they were talking about it before class. So I thought I would watch it over the weekend so that I could participate in the class discussions. I mean, it didn't lend itself to anything that we were talking about in class, but I thought it was a nice way to kind of relate and be relatable. And again, it's a stressful time. So I thought it was a nice way to, be in the know and participate in the before class discussions that were happening with students online. That kind of leads us into the other topic about what professors did during class to try to keep students engaged besides humor and entertainment. Amanda, what other things did you find helpful while professors were giving lectures?
I found it actually very helpful that some professors added guidelines for participation during class, whether that was adding points to try to contribute to questions or add thoughts or ideas depending on what we were discussing that day, and also adding discussion threads for legal topics. That was an opportunity for us to be able to expand upon things that we briefly touched upon in class, but then also interact with our classmates if we had a question as to why they thought a certain way or wanted to get a little bit more understanding based on what they had posted.
Yeah, I tried to, in class, it wasn't, I didn't try to make everything engaging because some things are just, topics you have to, and content you have to deliver. But I did find adding in 1 or 2 multiple choice questions in my PowerPoint slides, or even a poll, just a question that I polled the class doing and asked a question, and then we talked about it either in class or we had a discussion in the chat function of Zoom or Google Meet. I felt like it was a nice way to kind of break up the discussion and kind of bring some different perspective besides just a traditional Socratic method lecture. that also, trying to engage the students in more of an informal way brings us to the third topic about check-ins. Amanda, do you want to kind of give the audience some kind of discussion about how that was helpful to you guys?
Yeah, so my professors would check on us during class, and that seemed to be a pretty regular thing, either at the start of each week or checking in on us at the beginning of each class. And if they had noticed that someone was missing, they would ask if we had heard from them. And then I think behind the scenes would definitely be reaching out just during this time to attempt to be supportive. I think there was an underlying almost pressure for us as the students to try to show up to every remote class because we were at home. So for the professors to reach out meant a lot, and they wanted to be able to either ask that to the class, or it even asked if they should form maybe a Google form for people to respond more individually. But when professors would share with us about how they were handling everything with the shift online and what was going on with them, it seemed to make my classmates open up more, and that seemed to make a huge impact of how we were doing, and them checking in was really positive. So how did you check in with your students when we had transitioned to online learning?
Yeah, with having some students all over the place with externships, I mean, a lot of my students were in different places where they couldn't complete their hours, and so I had to give them a lot of additional assignments to do, and they needed a lot of different various hours. So I tried to find a time in the day, or I found a time in the week that everyone was available, that we could all get together and just talk remotely about how things were going. And I gave like a little bit of an assignment that wasn't a lot of work, like either watching a couple TED Talk videos or reading a blog post about, telecommunications or teleremote working. And then we would just talk about how things were going, how their hours were going, how classes were going. And I know that wasn't what they had intended to sign up for when they took an externship, but I felt like it was an opportunity, and they really opened up to tell me how things were going with them. And it was also an opportunity for me to kind of relate and tell them what we've been struggling with as professors and what I was struggling with individually as a person. So I think it was kind of helpful on both fronts to have check-ins for students and for professors as well. The fourth category that we had kind of talked about with these student recordings, and Amanda, I thought this was really interesting that some of my colleagues were doing. Can you explain what one of your professors did here?
Yeah, so student recordings is actually something that I used weekly as we started online. So during my trial advocacy class, we were required to illustrate a new skill each week in the classroom. So once we were no longer in that classroom setting, we were still tasked to be able to show skills that we would have learned. And so using the case file that we had prepared from, we had to record ourselves giving opening statements, directing cross-examinations of dealing with experts, and then near the end of the semester, we worked and presented our closing arguments. So I found myself able to be more engaged through this process by recording myself and then being able to give that back to my professor for feedback, and also be able to share that with classmates. So were you able to use any student recordings on your end to be able to engage students?
I didn't have them record themselves, but I definitely had them do the same types of things in the classroom setting. So, with the externships who were not able to go into court anymore because courts were all shut down, I gave them some opportunities and some hypotheticals where they could give a closing argument to me, or with an opposing party or opposing counsel, or a closing statement. And then in our clinic, because I run our clinic program as well here at Ohio Northern, we had a lot of students who had hearings scheduled who weren't able to participate in those hearings because, again, courts closed down when the coronavirus hit. So we still had them working on their cases just like they would have been going to trial, and we had them, present either in a recording or in the classroom setting in their closing arguments and opening statements, so we could give them feedback and still give them the same type of experience that they would have gotten despite the fact that they couldn't go in the courtrooms anymore. So, we tried to do what we could to provide as best of an opportunity experiential opportunity given the circumstances we had, especially in the skills and experiential learning classes. I think then that brings us to our last comment about in-class visuals. Amanda, what were some of the things that my colleagues did, your other professors did, that helped stay engaged with visuals during the lectures?
So specifically, my tax professor noticed that with the transition to online learning, we were all struggling to pay attention, and we were struggling to practice components of what we were learning. So what she had offered to do was take the PowerPoints that she had prepared before class, and as we were discussing general concepts that might not have had anything written down on the slides, as we were discussing these concepts and were generally reviewing them, she would go back and type and add to class, add to the PowerPoint she would send before class. So anything she added, she would make sure it was different than the normal text. She would underline it, she would circle it, she would highlight it. That way we would know this is a topic that we had discussed. And I found it to be very helpful to not only stay engaged during class, but also go back to a concept that felt difficult to grasp and work with it a little bit more.
Yeah, I also tried to do, for visuals, instead of me creating the PowerPoint presentations, I had students with their research projects that they were working on, either in the CALIc setting or in the externship setting, do presentations to us as the class, so that they were, kind of forced to try to make a discussion on their presentation as engaging as possible. And I figured that they knew better as to how to engage students since they were students. So I tried to have them create their own presentations to present to us, by sharing their screen and doing poll everywhere type of things during their presentations. And I also thought too, my colleagues tried to use the gallery view. Amanda, I know you were talking about that. We also found that pretty helpful in the Zoom and the Google Meet. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the use of gallery view I thought was really helpful when all the professors would ask that we would turn our cameras on. That way we could see if other people looked just as confused as I was, or, just be able to see other people. That way it felt like we were more in a classroom environment. So that was a really positive way to use, a gallery view instead of just being able to see a couple people from our class.
Yeah, it was helpful for us too. I think it was nice to see everybody to see if there was any confusion, to see if, anybody looked like they were maybe checked out. There's always the risk of, having everyone be at home and turning on your cameras and everything. But I think at the end of the day, it kept everybody more feeling like there was an actual classroom environment, even though we weren't in class with each other anymore. So yeah, I would agree. I think that was helpful for everybody. Well, Amanda, that kind of brings us to the 5 things that we thought we thought you as students thought would be helpful. So I just wanted to thank you for all of your help in this conversation and kind of helping us reflect on how things went from a student's perspective, because I think we talk and think about in the minds of professors how students would have felt it went. And so it's always good to kind of hear from an actual student what the students thought.
Yeah, no problem. I think for all of us it was a new learning curve, and I hope that even both students and professors' perspective can just take the online learning environment and just be able to make that grow depending on what circumstances are for the fall.
Yeah, so, on behalf of all of us, and Amanda and myself included, we want to say, thank you for your time. We hope you stay safe, wash your hands, and try to stay sane in this crazy time we're living in.
That was great. Thank you. Hey, let's pick a couple of the questions before we move to the next presenters. I may ask this of every group. Did the pandemic result in law faculty showing more care about students' health and welfare? Is there a silver lining to doing this online for some reason?
I mean, Amanda, you can chime in on this. I mean, we're pretty small at Ohio Northern. Most of our faculty members, we have a 50 to 60 person student class, and our faculty members really know our students very well. But I do think that we spent more time before and after class taking time to ask people how they were doing. I don't know, Amanda, if you saw that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think especially with our school being so small as it is, there's a lot of that communication that happens before or after class in person. So I think that transitioned to the same way after class. But I think, technology, the way you use it is really going to depend on the strength or weaknesses of a person to be able to reach out more, or maybe they're not as familiar with technology, so it doesn't fully enable them to reach out as much as they'd like to. But I think in all situations you can find a silver lining, and I think this semester we've all definitely tried to find that.
Awesome. This is such a good question, and I typed it in there, I know, so I'm patting myself in the back, but I want to ask all law students this. So you just graduated, but would you recommend to an incoming 1L that they take a year off, or, if the fall semester is going to be entirely online, having now experienced part of like spring semester?
I think it's that old answer in law school that everyone gets of it depends. I think it definitely depends on what kind of student you are. I am definitely the type of student where I learn more sitting in a classroom, looking to see nonverbal cues from my classmates and professors. And I think you lose a lot of that on over the phone, either telecommunications, video communications, things like that. Some people are able to fully grasp that and be okay with learning over the computer. But I think especially with there being so many doctrinal classes, I would just encourage, it's a lot of self-reflection of knowing what you're good at and then knowing what some of your weaknesses are, and just being able to be comfortable with what type of learner you are to decide whether or not you want to continue to pursue online class depending on whatever the institution is doing in the fall, or if you know that you're a better in-person learner, then you just have to admit that to yourself, and maybe you take a year off and gain a little bit more of legal education and understanding in a job, and then start that next year.
Cool. Assuming you can find a job, right?
Right.
All right. Thank you very much. Let's move on to our next presenters. Dionne, it's all yours.
Hi, everyone. So Dorothy, Hairston, Mitchell, and I are going to talk to you about what it's like teaching practical skills and experiential courses during a pandemic. We definitely felt like, what in the world are we going to do in our classes when they told us your students aren't coming back after spring break, but you still need to teach them how to be courtroom advocates and how to interact with clients? What? So before we go into some of the details, I'll go ahead and just have Dorothy to explain what some of our courses were, and then we'll talk to you about our tools, some of the things that we found key in presenting the classes, and also one interesting project that we did in the clinic. But Dorothy, our classes?
All right, so our experiential courses, Dionne and I both teach clinics, as well as what Dionne teaches the criminal defense clinic, and she also teaches trial practice class, and I teach the juvenile law clinic and a pleadings and practice class, and all of these are experiential learning courses. Of course, the clinics includes our students going to court and having live clients and cases, and then the trial practice and pleadings and practice class, we have simulations in those classes, and so we are going to speak to you all about what we did in all of those different classes.
All right, so let's talk first about tools that we found necessary. From the professor and the student standpoint, we all needed to have computers, we all needed to have microphones, we all needed to have cameras. Stable internet connection was essential. For us as professors, it was ideal if we had a hardwired connection so we wouldn't have interruptions during our class sessions or our meetings, but it was okay most of the time if we did not have the hardwire connection. We use Zoom at North Carolina Central for pretty much everything. And so the professors had their own Zoom Pro accounts, which allowed us to make sure that we could have scheduling flexibility, which is necessary definitely in a clinic. And then it also was a way of having some control over the security. Now, one thing I want to just talk to you more specifically about is the camera, because that was something that was really interesting. It was a new experience for me. We have laptops that have the integrated camera in it. And for most things in the class, that was okay. Students could see us head and shoulders. They could see our faces somewhat up close so that they could still get some of those facial cues and facial expressions to help with their understanding. But when it came time for me to try to demonstrate, what's the best way to stand? How do you stand and still allow yourself to gesture as necessary? How do you move about the courtroom? That integrated camera just wasn't gonna cut it. So what I used, I have an external webcam with a embedded microphone in it. I would plug that into my laptop through the USB port. I'd set that up in advance of class so that I would know where I would need to go to stand in my room here at home, and then make sure that the students would be able to see me, at least from head, at least down to slightly below the knees. Because if they could see all of that, they could get some sense of the demonstration and what the expectations were. And so I would use that, and it's pretty quick and easy in Zoom for you to toggle between whichever camera you want to use. So you're not wasting a lot of class time trying to deal with that. And then I'll also just say that students also sometimes would use an external camera. They didn't have an extra camera. They would just set up their smartphone somewhere else in their room and stand in front of that and do whatever demonstration they needed to do during class to show that they were learning the skills. Now that was in a trial practice class. Now I will also say, in terms of the tools that we used, we had to consider our clients. We had to consider guests, like guest speakers or possibly volunteer witnesses. They had the option of doing audio only or audio and video. And so a lot of times for clients, for comfort purposes, we would give them the option whether they wanted audio only, they could dial up. If they wanted the audio and video, they could call in, but they could have the choice whether they show themselves on the camera or whether they don't. But all of these tools were essential, and Zoom was a great asset to our programs. So Dorothy, let's talk about some planning.
All right, so let's talk about pre-class planning. So we all, as professors, have to plan for our classes. And so just like with being in a building, traditionally you have your syllabus and you kind of walk through that syllabus, and maybe you're, weeks in advance you plan for your class, or maybe the days or two beforehand. You say, okay, what am I teaching the next class? What do I need to do to prepare for that class? Well, we had to do that plus determine what we need to do when it comes to teaching virtually. So you want to, in thinking about your planning for classes, and when you're adding on the virtual learning, you want to ask yourself some questions. And so we came up with a few questions that you may want to consider beforehand. And those include, will I require all the students to have their videos turned on? I know the prior presenters, they spoke about that a little bit. Do I want to record the class? Do I need to record the class in some way? Do I want to use the breakout rooms? And what we're speaking about, as Dionne spoke to earlier, at North Carolina Central, we have been using the Zoom platform for some time. So all of these things as it relates to recording and breakout rooms and all of that, I'm referring to the use of Zoom when I'm speaking about that. But do you want to use a breakout room? Do you want to allow the students to chat with each other, or just with me as the professor, or not at all? How will I handle questions during class? So those are the questions, just some questions that we came up with that you may want to think about beforehand. And then you want to take what action? You want to think about what action am I going to take when it comes to these questions. So if you decide you do want to have your students turn their videos on so that you can see everyone and try to have as much of a normal type classroom as you possibly could have while having a class on Zoom, then you want to make an announcement either in your very first Zoom class or your very first virtual class. You want to make the announcement in class and tell all the students, hey, I want to make sure you all aware every time we log on for class or for meetings, make sure your videos are on. Or you want to send it out in a class, pre-class email and tell them, all the ground rules. just like you would do if you were in the building, right? At the beginning of each semester, we tell students what our expectations are for when they come into our classroom, or we might have to set certain expectations for a particular class. You're doing the same thing when it comes to a virtual class. Then we want to talk about if you decide you want to record that class, then you can set that, make that setting, put that setting in place when you set up your Zoom class, so you can have it automatically record when you go on. Or you can decide to just hit record, just like we're doing here with this conference. We're hitting record when we're ready to record. So you can do that while you're in your class too. So you can record, you can not record for a portion and then begin recording or anything like that. Then if you decide, am I going to use breakout rooms, right? How many rooms do I need to have? Then the number of rooms that you'll have for breakouts would be determined by what you're doing. Like, am I sending a number of students to each breakout room so they can discuss things? What am I going to have them to do in those breakout rooms? Do I want them to discuss amongst themselves, or am I sending them individually to a breakout room so they can work out on a problem? I know for me and Dionne, we had several of our classes where we had breakout rooms, and we gave the students detailed instructions about what we wanted them to do in that breakout room. And I let them know that we can jump into those breakout rooms with them, because we want to hear them and be involved in that organic learning and those organic conversations that they're having, just like you would see in a regular class, right? But make sure you give detailed instructions to the students about what you expect for them in those breakout rooms, because one of the worst things that could happen is you send them to a breakout room, you give them some questions, and they're like, what are we supposed to do with this, right? So you want to make sure that they're aware of that. And then if you want to, you can set your Zoom setting for whichever option you decide when it comes to whether you're going to allow the students to chat amongst themselves during your class time, or if you want them to only be able to chat with you, and how am I going to handle the questions. So I may decide that I will have my students interact with me throughout the class period. And I did that. I love that. I thrive off the back and forth with my students. So I allow the students to just jump in, use that little raise hand option on Zoom, or even just start talking if they're unmuted, and they will, ask the questions as we go along. Or I may have it where they can only chat with me, and I see those questions and I get them all and I save them towards the end. I would strongly encourage professors to consider turning off the chat option for students to chat amongst themselves, because you don't want them to chat so much amongst themselves that they're not engaged in the class. You want to keep them just like they would do in class, right? They're text messaging in a regular classroom and all of that. You want to try to keep that down as much as possible. All right. At the same time, you want to make that announcement pre-class too, if you can, or either make that announcement in class and give them all those different ground rules. So next I'll go to the keys to conducting practice skills presentations virtually. So Dionne and I came up with these different keys, and they spoke about a little bit of these too in the last presentation. So we have these 5 keys, the first one being proper court attire. As I spoke about earlier, we have our clinics, and especially in those clinics, and as well as the simulated classes, like the experiential learning classes in which we do simulations, we want to have the students be able to do these simulations in as much of a normal atmosphere as we can possibly make it, right? Being virtually. And one of the things that you want them to know is that if we're going to do closing arguments or opening statements, or have you do a direct or cross-examination or something like that, we want you to put your suit jacket on. Now, we would love for them to put their entire suit on, but at least they need to put on their jacket or whatever we're going to be able to see in the camera view, right? Because having that proper court attire just gets you in the mood. It makes you feel like I'm really in the courtroom, even though we're really not in the courtroom. And since we're not able to be in the courtroom or in our moot courtroom like what we have at the law school, we want them to feel, in the mood of that as much as possible. Dionne talked some about proper positioning, but what I want to speak to here as a key is about making sure the students are aware of where their camera is located. And if we're doing a simulation where we're doing cross-examination or a closing argument, how they're going to move about their room. Are they sitting down? We talked a whole lot about, we had some students that sat down the entire time and all they did was kind of read from their screen their closing argument. And that was not as engaging. It was not as, as what we would like for it to be, because we wouldn't want them to be that way in a courtroom, right? So we encourage the students to get up and move around their room if they can, and, and to move around the courtroom, the room as if it's a courtroom, right? It kind of goes to that proper courtroom decorum too. You want them to still be engaged in that, may it please the court, opposing counsel, may I approach the bench, using all those same phrases and proper courtroom decorum that we would normally have if we were in the courtroom or in a mock courtroom in some way. And then another key, our last key we talked about or want to speak to you all about, is giving proper feedback. Us being able to record these presentations allows for us to give the students proper feedback, not only on the content of their presentation. So for instance, us telling them, your closing argument was wonderful, but I suggest you have 3 points instead of the 8 that you had, and you know, that kind of thing. We give them feedback on that, but we also want to give them feedback on how they moved about their room using the webcam or whatever they have. And because quite frankly, in North Carolina, we have gone to virtually everything, the court appearances being via WebEx or some other type of format. And so we want the students to now learn how to do that. We want them to know that if we find ourselves again in a situation where we have to hold court or be a part of a court appearance by way of some virtual platform, we want them to be comfortable with being able to do that on those platforms. All right. So next, Dionne, we want to hear about that wonderful experience you had with your community advice clinic.
All right. So speaking specifically about clinics, right? As Dorothy mentioned, North Carolina courts shut down. Our students did not have the opportunity to go to court for the whole second half of their spring semester. That's the highlight of being in a clinic, right? Mm-hmm. So one of the things that we had to deal with was the fact that the students just had extreme disappointment about that. And it made them a lot less motivated to learn and to do. And so we had to deal with that. Now, let me just give you some context. At North Carolina Central, we have 2 ways that our clinics usually will engage in community engagement projects. One way is through our virtual justice program. That's where a clinical professor and their students will get together and they will give general legal information presentations virtually to large groups of people who may be at remote locations throughout our state. And so that's a good way of just educating the community generally, but there's no one-on-one interaction between the students, the professor, and the people that they're giving the information to. The other option that we would usually do in our clinics is have legal advice clinics where on one specific day, people would schedule appointments, come to the law school and meet one-on-one with our clinic students who were prepared already in advance to give legal advice to these individuals. And then in that setting, you know, all in one great big room, the supervising attorney, which would be me, would move around from table to table, greet participants who were coming in for advice, making sure that the students are delivering the advice, you know, and just like they're supposed to do. Now, of course, how do you do that virtually? Well, you know, the virtual advice clinic is essentially what we came up with. So we went from what you see on the right side of that slide to lots of tables set up, face-to-face interactions, to what you see there on the left. My students and I doing a virtual expungement advice clinic. We had one day set up. It was a way for people to schedule appointments to have these one-on-one interactions with our clients, with our students. Our students could prepare for them, just like any other face-to-face interaction, get supervision from me in advance, and then also during the actual advice clinic. The way we did it through the technology, we used Zoom again, and what we did, first of all, we set it up with the waiting room enabled. So no one was gonna come into our advice clinic without being allowed to do so. I had a paralegal from our clinic who assisted me with monitoring and managing the waiting room and greeting individuals as they showed up in our virtual space for their appointed time. She would interact with them, confirm who they were and who they were supposed to see. She already had a list in advance of who was supposed to be where and when. And where were the students? Each of them were in their own individual breakout room, almost like their own little individual table at a live advice clinic. And what would happen is the paralegal would direct the appointments to whichever student was assigned to speak with that person. And I was the floater. I would jump from breakout room to breakout room as necessary to advise and supervise the students. They could call for help. The paralegal would let me know, hey, they need you. And I'd know and she'd send me to whatever breakout room I needed to go in. We were co-hosting in that Zoom interface so that we could both handle a lot of those controls. But it was a very successful event. The participants got great legal advice. The students had a chance for one-on-one interaction through the clinic. And honestly, it's something that we'll probably do again in the future.
Right. Well, thank you, Dionne, for sharing with that. I just want to let everyone know that at our school, we pride ourselves on being able to provide these different clinics and opportunities for us to engage with the community. And we were so grateful that Dionne was able to continue to do that with her students, because that's a great need that we have for people who are looking for ways to be able to get their cases expunged. So we want to tell you, give some things that we thought about that you should think about for the future, or just new ways for law students to learn professional skills, new ways to expand access to justice, precautions against diminished quality. They're on the screen. We'll make sure that these slides get posted. We know we don't have that much time left, so we want to make sure that we stay within it. But we really appreciate you all for allowing us this opportunity to share our experience with you. Like I said, we are just grateful that we were able to continue to connect with our students. As Dionne said, they were highly upset that they weren't able to go to court as much or interact with their clients, but we as professors were upset too, of not being able to interact with our students. So being able to see them on a pretty much a regular basis, and some of us a daily basis, to speak with them still about the cases that they had, you know, and finding out how they're doing along the way as well for themselves during this COVID time period. That was having Zoom and this opportunity was really helpful for us.
All right, thank you very much. We're running just a little late, but I'm gonna just ask one or two questions here. First of all, folks love your slide template. So if you've got a link that you can post in the chat about where you got those slide templates, please do.
Will do.
The second one is from Claire. She says, Dorothy and Dionne, how would you speak to the best way to visit a breakout room? It is awkward to jump in.
Well, I actually tell my students beforehand that I will come into your breakout room. So just, you know, just so they'll know that I may jump in so that they won't feel awkward for the student. I want them to feel engaged. Plus for us and for me, in particular, and I know this, I speak for Dionne when I say this too, we get so connected with our clinic students because we don't have as many students in the clinic that they know us by the time we've gotten to this Zoom and breakout rooms. They know us so well, they don't have a problem with us jumping into their breakout room. Quite frankly, they probably want us to come into their breakout room because they have a question or they want to share something with us. And I forgot to mention this earlier, but they have the option of being able to send for us too. So they can send a little message and say, hey, I need you in my breakout room. So if I'm in a breakout room with someone else and they need me there, and I'm sure that's what Dionne experienced too when she ran that community advice clinic.
Yeah, the only other thing I would say on that is that I would also sometimes, not every time, but when I would jump into the breakout room, I would just send a quick chat, because the chat when you're in the breakout room only goes to those in the breakout room.
Mm-hmm.
And in that way, I'd say, hey, I'm here, you know, let me know if you've got questions. I'm just gonna listen. And then that seemed to break some of the awkwardness, because a lot of times they just kept talking, and if I needed to say something, I did, and if I didn't, I stayed silent.
Excellent. Very good. Let's go to our next speakers. Gabriela, please forgive me. I forgot to mention at the top of this that you're speaking in this. Gabriela Sotelo and Angela Downs. Take it away.
Are you muted?
See, I was so good about muting. Let me start again. We are so pleased to be with you today. My name is Angela Downs, and I'm a professor at UNT Dallas College of Law. I am also Assistant Director of Experiential Education. And Professor Sotelo, if you'd please introduce yourself.
Hi, I am Gabriela Sotelo, and I am a professor at UNT Dallas College of Law and one of the supervising attorneys in our community lawyering centers.
Okay. Well, let's go ahead and let's jump right in. So a little bit of background about UNT Dallas College of Law and our experiential education program. It's a little bit different from the normal model for law schools in that we have determined that we're going to do an integrative and kind of have a through line for the legal education of our students with experiential education, because our ultimate goal is to ensure that our students are practice ready. So we start really our first touch with our students is during fundamentals when we have our courthouse tour, where our students have the opportunity to tour the federal court, the civil court, as well as the criminal court. And then their second semester of their 1L year, we have the community engagement program. All of our students are required to commit and to perform 75 hours of community service as a graduation requirement. And we have community partners, nonprofits, governmental agencies that partner with us to provide these opportunities for our students. And then we have our community lawyering centers. And as I've shared with you, we have a different philosophy in that we not only want to provide legal education and a rich experience for our students, but we also have made a commitment to the communities in Dallas to provide legal services. And getting our community lawyering centers up and running, we made a commitment to the folks that we wanted to serve that are that we provide access to legal services. So our clinics are not located at the law school. They're actually in the communities. So we have two community lawyering centers. We were very deliberate about the name community lawyering centers because we wanted to create an environment where we knew that the services that we would be providing would be for the community, as well as providing that rich experience for our students. So at our community lawyering centers, we provide client representation. We also provide mediations. So we get appointed by the courts to provide mediations. And we also do a lot of community-wide events and information sessions. Obviously, we can never provide all the legal services that folks that reach out to us for assistance need, but we can certainly be at the forefront of providing education and other ways for folks to feel empowered in their community. Also, under the umbrella of experiential education falls our Joyce and Brown Innocence Clinic. This is the only clinic that's located at our law school building. We're actually located in downtown Dallas. And the Joyce and Brown Innocence Clinic is focused on working on cases of actual innocence for folks that are incarcerated in Texas. And then we have our externship program. So this is more information about our program. Since we opened our doors with our community lawyering centers in 2017, we've provided about 10,000 hours of legal services to the community, and that includes our community conversations, which is one of our signature programs, as well as our individual assistance. Our community lawyering centers provide civil and criminal. We've found that provides a richer experience for our students. Our students have told us that as they look to shape their practice, most will be sole practitioners or be within a small firm. And so in order to facilitate that, we determined that they needed to have a broad skill set. And so we provide that for them in our community lawyering centers. And as I've shared with you, we also have 2 distinct locations out in the communities. So let's talk quickly about the pivot to remote clinics. Like all of my colleagues, we were having a great semester, and then COVID-19 came and literally took the wind out of our sails. So what we did very quickly was in our pivot we said that we were going to pivot to remote clinics, and I'm going to describe to you exactly what that entailed. We still kept our community engagement requirement, but what we have done is changed our program so that we're delivering community engagement products to our students in a remote context. So all of our offerings, we've identified some new offerings as well as some of our current partners are now pivoting, and they're all remote access. So those include the Oak Cliff Veggie Project, which works on food deserts and disproportionality of lack of grocery stores in underserved communities. Also the YMCA, Youth and Government Program, and the census. So that's just to name a few. But our students are really going to be engaged with these online offerings, still able to provide much needed community assistance to nonprofits, but yet we can still keep them safe and protected because they're providing those services in the shelter-in-place environment. We've also have started another program called the CEP Ambassadors Program, where we have identified 16 students who will actually serve as our leads for these remote projects. They're going to help us be the face of experiential education, really helping us get the word out, helping us promote our programming, as well as helping other law students really get excited and engaged. And what we found is that once students cross that threshold and find an assignment that they like, they really get into it and they love being able to provide help and resources to folks in the community. Also, our community lawyering centers and our pivot to remote clinics, we very quickly figured out that we needed policies, procedures. Our most important thing that we looked at for both our community lawyering center work and our Joyce and Brown Innocence Clinic was ensuring that we maintained confidentiality for the clients that we served. So we created paperwork. All of our cases are managed through client management software. So we actually provided and created policies and procedures for students to ensure that they were entering their time in our client management software, as well as maintaining that confidentiality. And with our Innocence Clinic, we made certain that we reached out to all of our applicants to ensure them that although we were all sheltering at home and working remotely, we had not forgotten about them and that we would still be engaged in working on their cases, and we certainly have. I get mail at my home every week that I go through and help scan and assign to our students. So it is an ongoing process, and we certainly are committed to helping the folks that we said that we would serve. So I'm going to turn it over to Gabby to talk about our foster care assistance program. This is one of our newer programs, and she has done some incredible work ensuring that our students are engaged in a remote climate that we're currently find ourselves in.
Thank you. Students had identified foster youth as an area of interest in our law school. And we were in the process of developing programming through our community engagement and our community lawyering centers that engage students and foster youth. And then the pandemic hits, right? We're all talking about when the pandemic hits, that moment. And what happens? When it comes to foster youth, you've got these kids who are in foster care, who need to be tended to, right? Have needs and are sheltering in place. And then we had parents who were in the system trying to get their kids back from CPS. In Texas, we have a statutory requirement that all cases in which the department is seeking termination of parental rights must be disposed within a year. So basically, parents have 1 year to do everything that the court and CPS has requested of them to get their kids back. That clock was still ticking. That timeline was not affected by shelter-in-place orders. So what happened? Dallas County moved really quickly. They moved to Zoom. All of their hearings were being conducted via Zoom on schedule. So basically their dockets remained the same when it came to CPS cases. And if you had a CPS case set, it was going to be heard on Zoom at the same time. So while the rest of us were scrambling, trying to figure this out, right? I'm listening to my colleagues talking about how, you know, we had a week, right? We had a week to figure this out, to plan this, to go virtual, right? We had our IT people and our tech people working overnight, right? This is all happening. Well, at the same time, the legal system's doing the same thing. The courts are doing it. Our clients are doing it. The department, the government, everyone's trying to figure out, how do we do this? How do we go virtual? How do we keep things moving? Because these cases continue to move, right? And they were facing enormous challenges. So you bring students into these cases and you give students a seat at the table in that planning process, right? Like I said, I heard your presentations talking about that planning process and how we came up with new ideas and how we innovated. So you bring students into these cases and you give them an opportunity to be a part of the dialogue, to be a part of the conversation and of the innovation. One of my students, and that's her, that's us at a hearing, we had an opportunity to be a part of a contested CPS hearing. She managed to win and have our client's child support lowered substantially due to the pressures and the changes of COVID. So she was part of that dialogue, right? She presented to the court the struggles that people are going through and was part of the conversation and of creating solutions, of informing the court what's going on. So in experiential education, that's the opportunity that we have, is to bring students into that conversation, to be a part of the planning process of this new legal system that is being created in this virtual world. So that's how we, in our experiential education department, through our community engagement and our community lawyering centers, engaged the courts, the students, and the community by bringing them into the conversation and allowing them to be a part of the innovation. And so we talked a little bit about silver lining in the other presentation. And, I just wanted to add that there are silver linings. And to me, that was one of them, is that students get that opportunity to be a part of this. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Professor Downs.
All right, thank you. So we also went through and used Zoom to teach our 40-hour mediation training. I actually taught this course last week. I had 42 students who were enrolled. The breakout rooms I had about 14 breakout rooms that I would do and manage, and we did simulated exercises. But again, it's ensuring that our students have a rich experience, and that hopefully when we get back up and running, Gabriela, what she described, Professor Sotelo, with the foster care courts is a little bit unique. Other courts have pretty much shut down. Some are starting to open slowly, but we want our students to be ready and to be part of that conversation. So we did go forward with our mediation training. So what's next for us? Obviously, we're going to be looking at the impact of COVID-19. What we've done in our pre-planning is to really identify some of the things that we think are going to be coming down the pike. We're going to continue providing remote client services. We're actually doing remote client services this summer. Things that we've identified that we think are going to be hot topics for the future are going to be landlord tenants. Like many other cities across the country, Dallas County actually issued a moratorium on evictions when COVID hit. That moratorium is about up. And so we know there's going to be a lot of movement and a lot of cases where folks are going to need some assistance. Also family law cases, custody, divorces, things of that nature. We know that there's a need there. Also bankruptcy and consumer law debt claims. So we're also going to be looking on the policy side, the legislative side. Obviously, we know the country has been protesting, but we want to be at the forefront of looking to see what we can do to help direct policy and legislative efforts for the future. So a couple of things we've done kind of getting ready for that. Last Sunday, we actually instituted some student conversations. We provided a forum for students to meet with Professor Sotelo, myself, and our Director of Experiential Education just to vent, just to give them a space to talk about how they were feeling, how they were coping. I thought it would be a 1-hour conversation. We were actually on Zoom for 3.5 hours. Folks had a lot to say. There were a lot of different emotions, and we had about 40 students who joined us. So we're looking for those opportunities to connect with our students, to see how they're doing. The protest actually affected our law school. We're right in downtown Dallas. We're actually on Main Street. So there was some vandalism. Protesters actually have protested in front of our law school every day for the days that the protests have gone on. But we've had community partners that have reached out to us. One of our community partners called Cafe Momentum that works with at-risk youth, teaching them the restaurant trade, has reached out to us and asked us to do community conversations and educational topics on knowing your rights, father's rights, parent rights, really looking to see what it is we can do to assist. And one of the things we've also offered is an opportunity just to facilitate a conversation for the young people that work at Cafe Momentum, as well as the staff, to see how else we can be of service. So this is our confirmation. Thank you so much for this opportunity. We want to give a special thanks to Professor Jenny Wondracek and the Legal Education Technology team. We really enjoyed having this time with you, and thank you so much.
All right, thank you very much. And Jenny, apologies for maiming your name earlier. So we're over time, but we have time. Let's do a couple of quick questions. Howard is asking if there's time, can you talk a little bit more about teaching negotiation or the negotiation course online?
Absolutely. That was very interesting. It was a monumental task because in Texas, to get your credential, it's a 40-hour class. So I did a hybrid model that was a combination of live lecture as well as pre-recorded lecture. I knew that I didn't want to hear myself talk for 40 hours, so I pulled in some other guest lecturers to assist me. But I tried to keep it interesting. I have these ideas at times, and one of the things that I did was just to break up the monotony. I had just a through line through the course called Mystery Guest, and I would have just different people call in. I had several judges that call in. I had a bailiff call in. I had, just random people that were associated with mediation call in to the Zoom just to break up the monotony. The students were very responsive to it. They really enjoyed it. But I think it turned out to be a good class. My reviews were good. So I think if we have to move forward in that format again, we can certainly do it. The breakout sessions were challenging, and managing the number of breakout rooms was challenging because it was me. I did not have technical assistance. Professor Wondracek was wonderful in getting my platforms and making sure I was ready to go, but kind of the day of, it was me managing all of that. And it was a bit of a heavy lift, but it's doable. But certainly if you have questions or want some input, I'm happy to speak with you offline.
Very good. Here's one. And this is for anybody. So the courts went online, as you mentioned, at the same time that schools did, and you had to train students to present themselves on camera. I suspect that once we're past the pandemic, the courts are going to do a lot more stuff online because it saves time, it saves a lot of effort. They're seeing the efficacy of that. So maybe the training of students to present themselves on camera is going to be a permanent fixture. Care to comment?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And that's kind of what we were speaking to before, that the feedback that we would give our students when we recorded them doing their different presentations, we gave them feedback about if you have to conduct this kind of court appearance or be a part of a court appearance this way, then you need to be mindful of these things. So I would love to have that additional kind of class at our school, to be able to give them that as overall, because I foresee that we might find ourselves in this situation again.
And
all right,
John, could I speak to that as well? Thank you. One of the things that we told our students this past semester and even now during the summer is that as lawyers, we have to be flexible, we have to be nimble, and you have got to be adaptable in everything that you do, because you will think a case is going one way and it's going to go a completely different road. And so having the ability for our students to adapt to Zoom conferences and hearings, I think is critical. And having them with the ability of them to rise to the challenge, I think it's a skill that they're definitely going to need as they embark on their legal careers.
Very good. So I know we're way over time, but I'm so fascinated to have you all here. I got to ask this question. So when we're online, everybody's got a camera, and we can project ourselves into each other's spaces. We also have a recording device, which is to say everybody could be recording what's happening. And obviously the scary negative parts of that are FERPA problems, or capturing people's images to be used in a negative way in disinformation and social media, and positive sides. You could capture people's performances, and so the student could then bring the video to you and say, here's how I did, can you tell me, how I might improve myself, sort of the way. I don't know, do you care to comment on that double-edged sword of having a recording possibility in everybody's PC?
Well, I've had some thoughts about that, and honestly, that exists already in our day-to-day classrooms. If someone wanted to bring in their cell phone and hit record, right? I mean, so that worry just doesn't, because we're virtual, that hasn't changed it or even really upped the ante, because I think it's there anyway.
But cell phones used to be, at least in Chicago, you couldn't bring these into the courts at all. And I wonder if that's changed as a result.
I know in North Carolina, at least our local courts have made it very, very clear that parties, lawyers, no one is allowed to record the proceeding unless they have the permission of the judge, period. So you'd find yourself in contempt of court if you had a recording of a court proceeding that was virtual and you didn't have the judge's permission.
Well, that's good to know. All right. All right. Any last comments?
No, I just want to say thank you to the other presenters. I learned so much about what you all are doing at your law schools, and I'm quite fascinated and will be in touch.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you all very much. That was fantastic. We're running obviously a few minutes late, so presume that the sponsor session that's supposed to be started 9 minutes ago and wasn't supposed to start, we'll start about 2:15. All right.
Awesome.
See you all there.
All right.